The moment I heard the door slam, I knew it was over. My son's footsteps echoed in the hallway, and I felt the sting of his words like a slap to the face. "I never want to see you again." Those words had been hanging in the air for months, but hearing them out loud, spoken with finality, broke something deep inside me. It wasn't just the pain of rejection. It was the realization that all those years of sacrifice, all those long nights of putting my family first, had meant nothing. I wasn't even welcome in my own son's life anymore. I had always imagined that one day I'd be sitting on the porch, my kids and grandkids around me, talking about old times. That's what a family was supposed to be. That's what I thought it was. But somewhere along the line, everything changed. They changed. And I was left behind, nothing more than a shadow of the man I used to be, a man they didn't even want to acknowledge anymore. I walked into the living room, staring at the place that used to feel like home. I had worked my whole life for this. I built it brick by brick. Everything from the foundation to the roof had been a product of my labor, my sweat, my time. The furniture that sat in the corner of the room, the floors that I had installed with my own hands, they had all come from me. But it was all for nothing. None of it mattered anymore. Not to them. I sat down in the old armchair, the one that had worn out over the years, the one that was once my favorite spot to watch the games, to unwind after a long day. Now it felt like the last place I belonged. And then it hit me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence. I didn't even have to look at the screen. I knew who it was. Michael, my son. I let it ring. The first time, the second time. Then a text came through, "Please, we need to talk." It wasn't the first time he'd said that. "We need to talk" had become a phrase that felt like a warning, a precursor to another one of his condescending conversations. He wanted to make me feel small, like I was the problem, like I had somehow failed him. But no more. I wasn't going to be his punching bag anymore. If you want to know what happened after her call, you should probably subscribe. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at the phone. Instead, I stared at the old family photos hanging on the wall, the Christmas pictures, the birthday parties, the summer vacations we used to take. My heart twisted as I remembered those days. Those were the times when Michael would run up to me, laughing, asking me to play catch or help him with his homework. Back when he still looked up to me. Back when I was still someone he respected. That was before Isabella came into the picture. The woman who had somehow managed to convince my son that I wasn't good enough, that my cooking wasn't fancy enough, that my humor wasn't educated enough, that my family wasn't the kind of family she wanted him to have. I don't know when it happened, but I could see the slow transformation in Michael. It was like he had forgotten everything I had done for him. Forgotten all the years I spent working, all the sacrifices I made, just to give him a life he could be proud of. But Isabella had her claws in him now, and she was using him to build her own little kingdom of privilege, one where I was an outsider. Every time I tried to talk to him, it was like speaking to a stranger who didn't remember me, who didn't care about the man who had spent his life giving everything to his family. I should have seen it coming, I thought to myself. The change, the shift, the subtle hints that I was no longer welcome in their world. The dinners where I wasn't invited, the family holidays I was excluded from. And it wasn't just Isabella. It was all of them, even my daughter who had always been so close to me. They had all turned their backs. They had all chosen comfort over family. I had become a burden to them, a nuisance. An old man with too many memories, too much baggage. The bitterness I felt wasn't just about Michael and Isabella. It was about the entire life I had built, only to watch it crumble before my eyes. I had sacrificed everything for them. And now, as I sat alone in the silence of my living room, I realized just how little they cared. But that wasn't the end of it. It wasn't even close. No, this was just the beginning. This was just the first step in a plan I had been quietly working on in the back of my mind for months. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not this time. I wasn't the same man I used to be. The man who had blindly given his love, his time, his money, all for the sake of family. That man was gone. What was left was a man who had been broken, yes, but also reborn. A man who had finally learned that sometimes, in order to find peace, you had to let go of the things that weighed you down. And letting go meant something far more than just walking away. It meant taking back what was mine. The phone buzzed again. Another text. This time it was Michael again. "Dad, please pick up. We really need to talk." I smiled bitterly, looking at the screen. "No, Michael," I thought. "You've made your bed. Now you'll lie in it." There was a time when I would have answered, when I would have rushed to fix things. But not anymore. The man who would have done that was long gone. I wasn't his savior anymore. I wasn't anyone's savior. So I let the phone ring. And as it buzzed once again, I leaned back in the chair, my eyes fixed on the family pictures that lined the walls, and I finally felt a sense of clarity wash over me. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, and this time it was going to be my story, not theirs. The next time they come knocking, they won't find the same man they left behind. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably stay tuned. The days after Michael's final words were a blur. It's funny, isn't it? How quickly life shifts. One moment you're a father, the cornerstone of a family, and the next, you're left standing in a house that feels too quiet, too empty. I hadn't realized how much noise they had filled the place with until they were gone. Even the little things, like the sound of Michael's sneakers hitting the floor when he rushed to get to school, or the smell of Isabella's candles that she insisted on burning even when it was summer. Those were the things I missed. But now those things felt like echoes fading into the past. They didn't care about me. I wasn't the hero in their story, and I had been nothing but a fool propping up their fairy tale. The money I had given, the loans I had taken out, the years spent putting them before my own life, it all seemed so stupid now. I had been nothing but a stepping stone, a means to an end, a wallet with a heartbeat. When I realized how much I had given, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My hands shook when I thought about it. All those years, all that effort, only to be tossed aside like I didn't matter. And for what? To help them build lives for themselves, so they could leave me behind when it was no longer convenient. I stood in the middle of the living room, my eyes scanning the room as if searching for some kind of answer. The framed photos of Michael as a kid, his first baseball game, the time he came in third place at the science fair, his high school graduation, those memories no longer filled me with pride. They filled me with regret. I thought about how Michael had grown distant over the years, how he'd stopped coming around as often, how he would come to visit but only to ask for something, money for a new car, help with a bill. He'd never been shy about it. He knew what he was doing. But what really got to me was how he started pushing me away. The long conversations about his life, his goals, the "I've got it all figured out" dad speeches, those stopped. He'd been moving further and further away, physically and emotionally, and I hadn't noticed until it was too late. Isabella, too. I had always known she was calculating, but I had never realized how far she would go to isolate him from his own family. At first, I tried to be understanding, to give her the benefit of the doubt, but she never stopped looking at me like I was less than her. Always a little too polite, a little too distant. I could tell she didn't like me, and I had let it go. Now I was done being passive. I was done being the victim. I wasn't going to let them keep running me over. I walked to the kitchen, opening the drawer where I kept my bills, my statements, and there it was, the mortgage papers, the mortgage that had drained me. Every month I sent them nearly $3,000, money that I barely had to spare. I had to borrow against my house just to help them buy their own, and they barely even said thank you. That had been the final straw. I had kept giving because I thought that's what you did for family. You sacrifice. But when they cut me out of their lives, I realized how foolish I had been. As I looked at the mortgage papers, I realized something. I could do something about it. I had the power to stop this. I didn't need them to control me anymore. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the mortgage documents for what felt like hours, even though I knew it had only been a few minutes. There was a calmness in the pit of my stomach, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a strange peace, but it felt right. Maybe because for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about pleasing anyone. I wasn't worried about being the man they wanted me to be. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and stared at it for a long time. Michael's name flashed on the screen again. A message. "Dad, can we talk, please?" I didn't reply. I didn't even look at the message. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for my bank. I had been putting off this call for months, maybe even years, but now I knew what I had to do. "Hi, this is Dennis Flores," I said when the bank representative answered. I had already made up my mind. "I'd like to cancel my automatic mortgage payment, effective immediately." The woman on the other end paused for a second, but then she said, "Certainly, Mr. Flores. I just need to verify a few details with you." I rattled off the account number, the security questions. I knew I was doing the right thing, but something inside me twisted as the representative confirmed the cancellation. It felt final. It felt irreversible, but more than anything, it felt freeing. "Thank you, Mr. Flores," she said. "Your payment has been successfully canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I didn't even hesitate. "No, that's everything, thank you." I hung up, leaning back in my chair, staring at the phone in my hand. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel rage. I just felt calm. Finally, I was taking control. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably subscribe. I stood up and walked to the fireplace, the one I had built with my own hands, the house that I had built with my own sweat, and I threw the mortgage papers into the flames. Watching the fire consume them, I felt like I was burning away all the years I had wasted. Everything I had given to them, all the sacrifices, the broken promises, it was all turning to ash. It felt good, it felt right. As the papers turned to ash, a new thought crossed my mind. What if I didn't just stop the payments? What if I could take back everything they had taken from me? It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the house. It was the years they had stolen. The years I had given away, believing in a family that had stopped believing in me. And now, it was time for them to face the consequences. It was time for Michael and Isabella to understand that actions have consequences. This wasn't about getting even. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming my life, the life I had sacrificed for them. And they had no idea what was coming. To find out what happens next, stick around. The days that followed were a blur, each one blurring into the next as I tried to adjust to the new reality I was carving for myself. The silence was deafening, but in a strange way it felt peaceful. No more phone calls from Michael demanding money. No more texts from Isabella asking me to cover some expense or another. No more pretending to be something I wasn't, someone they could walk all over. But the calm didn't last long. One afternoon, a week after I canceled the mortgage payment, I received another call. This time it was Michael. It was Isabella. I didn't even bother to check the number. I already knew what she wanted. I let the phone ring twice before I picked up. The moment I said hello, her voice was cold and cutting, like a blade scraping against steel. "Dennis," she said, as if she had all the time in the world. "I need to talk to you. You've really messed things up this time." My stomach tightened. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I held my ground. "I'm listening." "Don't act like you don't know what you've done," she snapped. "I'm not sure what's gotten into you, but cutting off the mortgage payments was the worst mistake you could have made. You've put Michael and me in a terrible position." I clenched my jaw, the words threatening to spill out before I could stop them. "You think I've put you in a bad position?" I bit back the words, forcing myself to stay calm. "You think that's what this is about? Michael and I have been in a bad position for years. You just didn't notice." There was a silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her trying to process what I'd said, but she recovered quickly, her voice dripping with condescension. "You've always been so dramatic, Dennis. You're making this all about you. We were just trying to move forward and you had to go and complicate everything. If you don't reverse the payments, we're going to lose everything." Everything, I echoed, my voice rising slightly. How much more of everything do you want, Isabella? I've given you everything. What more do you need? She paused, clearly caught off guard. You're being ridiculous. You know we can't keep up with the payments without you. I'm not doing this anymore, I said, my voice hardening. I'm done being your ATM, done being your punching bag. I gave you everything I had, and now I'm taking it all back. Another long silence followed, and I could hear her breathing, shallow and tense. You really think you can just walk away from this? You can't do that to Michael. You're his father, for God's sake. It was like a switch had flipped inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even frustrated. It was just clarity. I was his father, I said, my voice cold. But you made sure I wasn't anymore. You all did. You kicked me out of your lives when it was convenient for you, and now I'm supposed to drop everything and fix your mistakes. No, I'm done. I ended the call, feeling the weight of those words hang in the air like a storm cloud. The last conversation I would ever have with Isabella, and it wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about respect, something I had been too blind to demand for years, but no more. If you want to know what happens after that phone call, you should probably hit subscribe. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The endless sacrifices, the way I had been manipulated, and how, for so long, I had let it all happen, but not anymore. I had finally reached the point where I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't be the fool who just took it. I was done. The next morning, I got up early and went to the mailbox. I had been putting off checking it, but today felt different. I was finally taking control. When I opened the box, I saw it, an envelope addressed to me from the bank. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the usual junk mail. It was thick, important. I didn't even hesitate. I ripped it open right there, standing on the sidewalk, my pulse quickening in anticipation. It was a foreclosure notice. Not for my house, but for Michael and Isabella S. My hands shook as I read the letter. They had fallen behind on their payments after I canceled mine. The house I had helped them buy was now in jeopardy. The bank had given them a final deadline to pay up, or they would lose everything. For a moment, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me, but then something else settled in, a feeling I couldn't quite shake: guilt. I had been ready to take everything back, but seeing the actual consequences, seeing the numbers, the reality of what was happening, made me wonder if I had gone too far. Michael was my son, and I couldn't escape the fact that I still loved him. Even after everything, I still wanted him to succeed, to have a life of his own. But then I reminded myself, this wasn't about me anymore. This wasn't about what I had done for him. This was about him learning that nothing in life comes for free. He had taken from me for so long, and now it was his turn to face the consequences. I made a decision right then. I wasn't going to be the one to fix it, not this time. As I stood there, holding the foreclosure notice in my hands, I knew what I had to do. I was going to let them suffer the consequences of their own actions. It wasn't my job to bail them out anymore. The question now was, how far was I willing to go to make sure they learned the lesson? To find out, you'll have to hit subscribe. It's funny how quickly guilt can turn into clarity. When the foreclosure notice came, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for Michael and Isabella, but the truth was I couldn't. They'd done this to themselves. Every step they had taken to manipulate me, to drain me, had led to this. But now that it was real, now that the consequences had set in, I was hit with something that felt like a strange mix of relief and cold determination. I wasn't going to fix this, not for them, not anymore. But there was something else. I didn't want them to think they had won. I didn't want them to think that just because I walked away, they had the upper hand. No, I wasn't done yet, and I wasn't about to let them continue to play the victim. The days after I received the foreclosure notice were a blur. I kept myself busy with things I had been neglecting: my health, my house, the things that had always been pushed to the side in favor of them. I started cleaning out the garage. A part of me felt like I was cleaning out my entire life. I knew that the time would come when Michael would reach out again, begging for help. It was inevitable, but I wasn't going to make it easy for him this time. He had crossed a line and there was no going back. A week passed and the phone didn't ring. No texts, no desperate calls from Isabella trying to smooth things over with her polished words and rehearsed apologies. It was quiet, too quiet. And then one morning, I got the call I'd been waiting for. I recognized Michael's number on the screen, but I didn't pick up, not right away. I let it ring a few times, the screen flashing his name like a warning. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. It wasn't going to be an apology, I already knew that. It was going to be a plea for help, an urgent request that would come with all the guilt trips and sob stories he had learned from Isabella. He was going to tell me how everything had fallen apart, how they were about to lose everything, how he had nowhere else to turn. Finally, I picked up. "Dad," Michael said, his voice cracking with something that sounded like fear. "We need to talk." I cut him off. "No, we don't need to talk. You've made your bed, Michael. Now you get to lie in it." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, the sound heavy and labored. I could almost feel the weight of his desperation, but I wasn't buying it anymore. "I don't understand," he said, his voice soft, confused. "Why are you doing this to me? I'm your son." "And I've always been there for you," I replied. "But you've taken everything I had to give. You've used me, lied to me, and excluded me from your life when it was convenient for you. And now you want me to bail you out again. No, Michael, not this time." "But I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've been distant, but please, Dad, we need your help." I could feel the anger rising in my chest, the words bubbling up before I could stop them. "You need my help. You're asking me for help after everything you've done to me, after everything you've taken. You and Isabella have everything you've ever wanted, Michael. You've just been too blind to see it. Well, it's over. I'm done." He was silent for a long time. I wondered if he was crying. I wondered if he was sorry. But it didn't matter. It didn't change anything. He had hurt me too much for too long. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Michael spoke again. His voice was quiet, almost pleading. "I never wanted it to be like this. I just wanted to make a life with Isabella. I thought it was what was best. But now I can't fix this. I don't know what to do. Please just help me one more time." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was the moment where I had to make it clear. "You don't get to make decisions for me anymore, Michael. You don't get to use me as your safety net. I'm not your bank, I'm not your fixer. You're a grown man now. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." Another silence, then the words that I had expected. "I don't know if I can do it, Dad." "You'll have to figure it out," I said coldly, not letting the emotion get to me. "Like I had to figure it out when you turned your back on me. Like I had to figure out how to live without you." I hung up the phone, the weight of it finally sinking in. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about what I had given them. It was about the principle. It was about making them see that nothing in life comes for free, that actions have consequences. And I wasn't going to be the one to fix their mess. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. As I sat there, the phone in my hand, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would they figure it out? Would they finally realize that I wasn't the man I used to be? Or would they continue to wallow in their own arrogance, expecting me to fix things for them? I didn't know, but what I did know was that I was done being their savior. And the story, well, it was only just beginning. The week that followed Michael's call was strangely quiet. No more frantic messages, no more pleading phone calls. It was like they had disappeared, and in some twisted way I felt a little lighter. But there was still something gnawing at me. The guilt, the lingering doubt. Had I done the right thing? Was this really justice, or was I just too stubborn, too angry to see the bigger picture? Then on the fifth day, I got a text message from Isabella. No call this time, she had learned her lesson. But the message was short, direct, and hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. "We need to talk. This is between us now, no one else needs to know." There it was, a simple request, but something in the tone of it triggered something deep within me. Something told me she wasn't calling to apologize or beg for help. She was reaching out, probably with some manipulative trick, hoping I would come around, hoping I would soften and forget everything that had happened. It was a message I could have ignored, but I didn't. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, the little dots of the typing indicator flashing as I waited for her to say more. Finally, I put my phone down, stood up, and walked out of the room. I didn't need to rush this. If I was going to see her, it had to be on my terms. I spent the next few hours thinking about everything. The years of sacrifice, the money I had thrown away for them, the empty promises I had made to myself. The words Isabella had said to me in the past, the way she had always made me feel inferior, less than. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the constant reminder that I was never enough. But this time, I wasn't going to fall for it. I called her back a few hours later. "Isabella," I said when she picked up, not giving her time to speak first. "You said you wanted to talk, I'm listening." She sounded caught off guard, but she quickly regained her composure. "Dennis," she said, her voice calm, but with that underlying coldness I had grown so used to, "I know things have been hard and I understand why you're upset. But I need you to understand that this isn't about the money. It's about Michael, about us, our future." "Your future," I corrected, "not mine." She didn't respond right away, and I could tell she was trying to decide whether to push harder or take a different approach. I could almost feel her calculating how best to handle me. "I know you feel like I've hurt you, and maybe I have," she finally said, almost too sweetly. "But don't you think it's time to put all this behind us? We're family, Dennis. We should be helping each other, not tearing each other apart." I laughed softly, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "Family," I repeated. "That's rich coming from you. You've made it clear that I'm not part of your family anymore, Isabella. You've made it clear that I don't belong. You and Michael both. I don't fit into your perfect little world, and I'm done trying." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing. Was she surprised? Was she trying to come up with another manipulation tactic? Finally, she spoke again. "I didn't want things to go this far, Dennis, but now, we have no choice. We've already lost so much. The house is in jeopardy. Michael, he's falling apart. He doesn't know where else to turn. And if we don't get the mortgage back on track, everything will fall apart. We'll lose everything we've built." I could feel the guilt creeping in, like a weight pressing on my chest, but I pushed it back. She was trying to play on my emotions. She was trying to make me feel responsible for their mess, for their mistakes. But I wasn't responsible. I wasn't the one who had let them down. They had done this to themselves. "I told you I'm done," I said, my voice hardening again. "You wanted me to be your safety net. Well, I'm not anymore. You and Michael need to figure this out on your own. It's time for you to take responsibility for your own lives." Another long silence followed, and when she finally spoke again, I could hear the frustration in her voice. "You're making a mistake. You're pushing us away, Dennis, but fine. If this is how you want it, then this is how it will be." There was finality in her tone, but in my gut I knew that wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. She was angry. And when Isabella got angry, she didn't let go. She would come at me from another angle. She always did. I hung up, but as I did, a sense of dread washed over me. What had I just set in motion? They weren't going to just let me go. They were going to fight me for this, and I knew it. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. I stared at my phone for a moment, wondering if this would ever end. They hadn't realized it yet, but they were already losing. Everything I had ever given them was coming back to haunt them, and they were too blinded by their own arrogance to see it. I wasn't going to give up, not now. This was my fight and I was going to finish it. But as I walked back to the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had underestimated just how far they were willing to go. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what was coming next. The silence after my conversation with Isabella lasted less than a day. It was as if she had been waiting for a moment like that to strike. The phone rang late the next evening, and when I saw the name on the screen, I knew exactly who it was. Michael, of course. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I didn't need to. "Hello," I said flatly, letting the word hang in the air. "Dad," Michael said, his voice trembling slightly. "I know you're angry. I know you think we've wronged you, and maybe we have, but please, I'm begging you, don't do this. Don't turn your back on me." I let out a sigh, leaning against the counter. "I haven't turned my back on you, Michael. You turned your back on me. You made your choice a long time ago, and I'm just living with the consequences." "No, that's not fair," he shot back, his voice rising with frustration. "I never asked for any of this. I never wanted to hurt you, but you have to understand. This is about survival. Isabella and I, we've worked so hard for everything we have. And now everything's falling apart. I don't know what else to do." My blood ran cold. "You don't know what else to do. You want me to fix your mistakes, to bail you out for the 100th time, and you don't know what else to do." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "You want me to save you from the mess you created. You're a grown man, Michael. It's time for you to take responsibility, for once." He was quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing through the phone, trying to steady himself. But the desperation was still there, hanging in his voice. "Please," he said, quieter now, "I don't want to lose you. We're losing everything. The house, the business, everything we've worked for. Please don't make me face this alone." It hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't ready for that. I had spent years hardening myself against the manipulations, the guilt trips, but hearing him speak like that, so raw, so vulnerable, was like peeling back a layer I hadn't been prepared to expose. For a moment I hesitated. The part of me that still cared for him, that still remembered the days when he was my son, the one I'd raised and loved. That part of me was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But I pushed it aside. I couldn't let that old softness rule me anymore. "Michael," I said, my voice firm, "I've been there for you. I've been there for you through every hard time. I've given you everything I had, and look where it got me. Look at what I've lost. The only reason you're asking for help now is because you've lost everything. But where was I when I needed you? Where were you when I was trying to help you build your life? This is on you now." He was silent again. The weight of my words seemed to sink in. "Dad," he finally whispered, "I'm sorry." The apology sounded hollow, like a last-ditch effort to stop the inevitable. But I had already made up my mind. He had to face the consequences. If I didn't let him feel the pain of his choices, he'd never learn. "You should have thought about that before you pushed me out of your life," I said coldly. "You made your choices, Michael, and now you'll have to live with them." I ended the call without waiting for him to respond. The silence that followed was deafening, but it wasn't the same kind of silence that had haunted me before. It was a silence that felt like freedom. But I wasn't naive enough to think that would be the last of it. Michael had been conditioned to think he could always come back to me, to treat me like a safety net whenever things went wrong. And Isabella, well, she was far from done. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. The next morning there was a knock at my door. A soft, hesitant knock that I knew could only be one thing: a messenger. I opened the door, and standing there was Michael, looking like a man who had aged a decade in a matter of days. His face was gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed as if he hadn't slept in days. He looked defeated, broken even, in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child and had lost a big game at school. I need to talk to you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stared at him for a long moment before stepping aside to let him in. He didn't take a seat. He stood there awkwardly, eyes downcast, hands stuffed into his pockets. The way he carried himself was different, like he had lost his confidence, his arrogance. He looked like a man who was slowly realizing that he was no longer in control of his own life. "Dad, I know you don't want to help," he started, but I cut him off. "I don't want to help," I said flatly, "but I can't just stand here and pretend like nothing happened. You know why I stopped helping you, don't you? Because you stopped caring about me. You stopped treating me like family, and now you want me to fix everything. It doesn't work like that, Michael." He nodded slowly as if the weight of the words were finally sinking in. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I never meant for things to go this way. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was doing what was best for us, for me, for Isabella. But I can see now. I can see how much I hurt you." His words felt like a hollow echo. Maybe it was the exhaustion in his voice. Maybe it was the guilt that I could hear beneath every syllable. But I knew better than to be fooled by it. "You want to fix things?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Then stop looking for a way out. Stop trying to drag me back into your mess. You've made your bed, now lie in it." He looked up at me, eyes wide with a mixture of pain and confusion. "What does that mean? What do you want me to do?" "Figure it out," I said. "That's what you need to do. You need to figure it out on your own, because I'm not your safety net anymore, and I'm not coming back to save you." And just like that, I watched him leave. To find out what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. The door closed behind Michael with a finality that made my stomach churn, but I didn't let it show. I stood there, staring at the spot where he had just been, as if his presence could still be felt in the room. The house had grown eerily quiet again. Even the usual hum of my thoughts seemed muted, like the world itself was holding its breath. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief after he left. It wasn't the kind of relief that came from forgiving him or offering him comfort. It was the kind that comes when you've made a decision you know you'll never take back. This wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't about any of them. But as the day wore on, a quiet unease began to creep back in. I kept telling myself that I was doing the right thing, that they needed to learn the consequences of their actions, that they had been taking advantage of me for too long. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept hearing their voices. They were still calling to me, still trying to pull me back in. It was like I couldn't escape the weight of their expectations. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. By the time night came, I had gone over the same thoughts 100 times. What if I was wrong? What if I had crossed a line? I wasn't a cruel person. I wasn't heartless. I had always been the one to fix things, to make everything right. But after everything they had done, I couldn't be that person anymore. I couldn't keep giving, keep sacrificing for people who would never appreciate it. And yet, when the phone rang again that night, I couldn't bring myself to ignore it. It was Michael this time. It was Isabella. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "What now?" I said before she could even speak. "Dennis," she said, her voice soft but urgent, "we need to talk." "I thought we already did," I replied, my tone sharp. "You wanted to fix things, but I told you this is on you now. I'm done." "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. "But you need to understand something, too. This isn't just about you or Michael or me. It's about the family, it's about the house, it's about everything we've built. If you don't step in now, everything will fall apart. Michael's not handling this well. He's not himself, and I'm scared. He's sinking, Dennis, and I'm afraid he won't come back from this." I closed my eyes, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You've been through this before. You've always been able to fix things, haven't you? You don't need me anymore. You and Michael made your choices." "You don't get it," she said, her voice suddenly sharp, though it was still laced with that practiced calmness. "Michael is going down a path that's going to ruin everything. He's not the same person you remember. I know you see him as this man who can handle things, but he's not. And neither am I. I don't want to lose what we have, Dennis. I don't want to lose you. Or him. Not like this." For a moment, I felt the familiar tug at my heart. The guilt, the regret. It all hit me in a rush like a flood breaking through a dam. I had to remind myself that this wasn't about saving them anymore. This wasn't about fixing things. But as much as I told myself that, a voice inside of me couldn't shake the idea that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as cut and dry as I thought. Maybe I had been too harsh, too quick to shut them out. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. You've put me in a position I never should have been in, I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. All these years you've taken from me emotionally, financially, and I've always given, always tried to make things right. But this time I'm done. I'm not going to fix things for you, not anymore. You're going to have to find a way on your own. There was a long pause on the other end, a silence thick with tension. Then Isabella spoke again, her voice soft but desperate. Please, Dennis, please, you're all we have left. If you walk away now, we'll lose everything. If you walk away, Michael will never recover from this. He won't be able to handle it. I know you think I've manipulated you in the past, but I'm telling you the truth now. I need your help. I stood there staring at the wall, my hand gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. I could feel the years of resentment, of hurt, pushing against my chest, trying to break free. But I knew deep down that I couldn't go back. Not after everything. You're asking the wrong person, I said finally, the words cold and final. I'm not coming back to fix this. You and Michael are going to have to figure it out on your own. I'm done. Isabella didn't respond immediately. I could hear her trying to find the right words, trying to reframe the situation in a way that would pull me back in. But I had made my decision, and this time there was no going back. I ended the call without another word. The silence that followed felt different than before. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't the calm of a decision made. It was the silence of finality, of severing ties that had been there for far too long. I had done what I needed to do. I had cut them loose. But deep inside, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I hadn't seen the last of them. To find out what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. The following days were a blur of small, ordinary tasks, things I'd once done with ease but now felt like chores I had to force myself through. I cleaned out more of the garage, replaced a few light bulbs that had burned out weeks ago, and rearranged the furniture, just trying to keep myself busy, to avoid sitting still with the gnawing feeling of uncertainty that had settled deep inside me. I couldn't shake the weight of my decision. I had been clear, decisive, and I'd cut ties. But why did it still feel like there was a part of me that hadn't truly let go? Every time I picked up the phone, even to make a simple call, I expected to see their names on the screen. It wasn't just the guilt of turning my back on them that haunted me. It was the knowledge that deep down I still cared. I still loved them. But I had to remind myself, it was their turn to learn the consequences. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. The phone buzzed again a few days later, and for the first time in weeks, I hesitated. The message was from Michael. I stared at the screen for a moment before reluctantly unlocking it. "Dad, please, I need to see you." I didn't respond. The same words echoed in my head, and I shook my head. He didn't need me. He didn't want me in his life until things started falling apart. And yet, there was that small part of me, the part I couldn't quite kill off, that wanted to open the door to him again, to let him in. But that part was weaker now. That part had no place in this new life I was trying to carve for myself. I let the message sit there, unanswered. That night as I sat down for dinner alone, I thought about all the things I used to do for them. The hours I'd spent building their lives, fixing their problems, patching up the holes they kept digging for themselves. And yet, it had never been enough. It would never be enough. They would always want more. I thought about how many times I had told myself I was doing it out of love, out of responsibility. How many times had I justified their behavior because they were my family? I had been blind for so long. But now I saw it all so clearly. It had never been about love or family. It had been about control, and I had allowed it for too long. As I cleaned my plate, I heard a knock at the door. A soft, tentative knock that made my heart race for a split second before I calmed myself. I already knew who it was. I wasn't going to let them pull me back into this. If you want to know what happens after the knock, you should probably hit subscribe. I stood up slowly and walked to the door. There was no turning back now. If I opened it, I was making a choice. I wasn't just going to answer to Michael or Isabella anymore. I wasn't going to be the man who kept getting dragged back into their lives because they needed something. I opened the door. Standing in front of me was Michael. It was Isabella. She looked different than I remembered, older, more worn down. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. The confident, manipulative woman I had known seemed to be gone, replaced by someone much more vulnerable, almost broken. She was still trying to hold herself together, but the cracks were evident. "Dennis," she said softly, as if testing the waters, "we need to talk, please." I didn't say anything. I just stood there waiting for her to speak, to explain why she had come to me. After everything, why was she still here? What more could she possibly want from me? "Michael is falling apart," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I know you think I've manipulated you, but I'm telling you the truth now. He's drowning, Dennis. He's so far in over his head, and I don't know what to do anymore. I can't fix this. I've tried, but he's pushing me away, and I can't do it alone." I leaned against the door frame, taking her words in. "You've put yourself in this position, Isabella," I said slowly. "Both of you have, and now you want me to come back and fix it all. You want me to be the one to pull him out of the mess he's made, to bail you both out once again. But I'm done being that guy. I've been that guy for years, and look where it got me." She looked down at her feet, her shoulders slumped, the weight of her own choices pressing down on her. For a moment, I saw a side of her I'd never seen before, a side that wasn't trying to manipulate, a side that was desperate, just like Michael. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for anything tangible this time. "I'm sorry, Dennis," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never wanted it to go this far, but please, Michael needs you. I can't do this without you." I stood there for a long moment, letting her words sink in. The silence between us was heavy. This wasn't the same as before. She wasn't playing the same game. But was I supposed to fall for it again? Was I supposed to come running like I had before? I wasn't sure. I finally spoke, my voice low and firm. "I've made my decision, Isabella. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't. It's time for you and Michael to face the consequences of your actions." She nodded slowly, as if accepting something she had known all along. "I understand," she said quietly, and for the first time I believed her. She turned to leave, but before she did, she glanced over her shoulder at me. "You were always there for us. I know that now, but it's too late for apologies. I just hope you can forgive me one day." And with that, she was gone. I stood at the door for a long time, wondering if I had made the right decision. But deep down, I knew I had. They had taken enough from me. It was time for them to stand on their own 2 feet. But something told me this wasn't the last time I'd hear from them. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. The days that followed Isabella's visit were filled with a strange stillness. It was almost as if the world had paused, holding its breath. The phone didn't ring. The door stayed quiet. For the first time in a long while, I was left alone with my thoughts, my space, my life. I felt free, but not in the way I had expected. This wasn't the freedom of someone who had made peace with their decisions. It was the freedom of someone who had severed the last tie that held them to a past that no longer served them. And still, a part of me was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Michael's message, his apologies, the desperation in his voice, they couldn't be just a phase, could they? They had to know by now that I wasn't going to come back to their rescue. I wasn't going to play the role of the sacrificial father again. But that didn't stop me from wondering if they had learned their lesson, wondering if, deep down, they were truly sorry, or was it just another round of manipulation? Another game they thought they could win if they tried hard enough. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. The silence stretched on for days. The phone remained silent. I began to convince myself that I had made the right choice, that this time they were going to have to face the consequences of their actions without me standing in the way. But then, late one evening, as I sat in front of the television, a text message buzzed on my phone. It was from Michael. "Dad, please, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I'm not sure how to keep going without you." I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Every part of me knew exactly what I should do. Every part of me knew that I had already made the decision, that I had already taken the step of walking away. But there was something in those words, something raw, that made my stomach twist. It was different from before. It was different than all the other times he had begged for money or help or forgiveness. But I couldn't let myself be fooled. I couldn't let him reel me back in just because he sounded broken, just because he sounded like the person I used to know. I put the phone down. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. The guilt, the lingering doubt came flooding back in. Was this the right thing? Was I really doing what was best for him, for me? If you want to know what happens after Michael's message, you should probably hit subscribe. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's face, his pleading eyes staring back at me. I saw the way Isabella had looked, standing at my door, broken and vulnerable, as if everything had finally shattered in front of her. I saw the lives they had built for themselves, the lies, the manipulation, the hurt, and I couldn't help but wonder, had I been too harsh? Had I pushed them too far? The next morning, I woke up and decided to go for a walk. I needed to clear my head. As I walked through the quiet neighborhood, I realized how much had changed. I had spent so many years catering to their needs, listening to their complaints, fixing their problems, that I had forgotten what it was like to live for myself. To do things for my own sake, to take care of my own life without worrying about what they wanted or needed. But then I came to a harsh realization. I wasn't done with them, not yet. As I walked back to my house, I stopped in front of a small cafe I had passed 100 times but never bothered to enter. Today, it seemed like the right place to sit down and think. I ordered my coffee and sat by the window, looking out at the world moving on without me, without them. And then it hit me. I had spent years bending over backward for them. I had spent years playing the role of the martyr, believing that if I just kept giving, just kept sacrificing, things would eventually get better. But it hadn't. It had only made things worse. The more I gave, the more they took. And the more they took, the more I lost myself in the process. Maybe this time, it wasn't about helping them. Maybe it was about helping myself. If you want to know what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. I pulled my phone from my pocket and typed a quick message back to Michael. "I'm sorry, Michael. I can't help you this time. You have to figure this out on your own." I sent it before I could second-guess myself. I had made the right decision. I knew I had. But then, as I sat there staring at the screen, my phone buzzed again. The message from Michael was still fresh in my mind, but this time, the text that appeared on my screen made my heart stop. "I'm not going to give up on you, Dad. Not like you did on me." I stared at the words, my throat tightening. There it was again, another line, another attempt to pull me back, another way for him to make me feel guilty, to make me feel responsible. And I hated it. I hated that after everything, he still couldn't see what I was trying to do, what I had to do. I wasn't just walking away from him. I was walking away from the endless cycle of manipulation, from the weight of their expectations. I was finally walking away from the family that had never really seen me. To find out what happens next, you should probably hit subscribe. I sat there in the small cafe, staring at the message on my phone, feeling the weight of it settle heavily in my chest. Michael's words, "I'm not going to give up on you, Dad, not like you did on me," echoed in my mind. The guilt I had worked so hard to suppress was creeping back, relentless, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. But I knew something now that I hadn't understood before. If I didn't finally let go, I would be lost forever. If I gave in now, everything I had done, the steps I had taken to reclaim my life, would have been for nothing. For the first time in years, I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. It felt like my lungs were working properly again. I had spent too long suffocating under their expectations. And now, it was time to breathe, time to reclaim the man I had once been, the man who could stand on his own, who wasn't defined by what others wanted from him. If you want to know what happens after the final decision, you should probably hit subscribe. I left the cafe without responding to Michael's text. I could feel his desperation seeping through the screen, and I knew that if I replied, I would be right back where I started, stuck in the same cycle of disappointment and manipulation. I didn't want to be the man who kept fixing things, patching up wounds that weren't mine to heal anymore. They had to do it themselves. When I got home, I went straight to the living room and sat down in the chair that had once been my place of comfort. The place where I used to think everything could still be fixed, where I believed I could still make a difference. But that was before I realized how much of myself I had sacrificed. That was before I understood that love wasn't supposed to feel like a burden, a responsibility that weighed me down until I could no longer recognize myself. I looked around the room at the old photographs of my family, the ones that used to bring me comfort. But now they only reminded me of what had been taken from me, what I had given away willingly, believing it would be returned with love, with respect. But it never had been. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. I had been the father, the provider, the fixer for so long, and now it was time for them to take ownership of their choices. I had given everything I could give. I couldn't give any more. As the days went by, the silence remained. No calls, no messages, no apologies. I didn't know if Michael and Isabella had understood what I was trying to do or if they even cared. But I had to believe they would be okay. That was the hardest part, the belief that they could figure things out without me. But I had to trust that the lesson had been learned, that they would face the consequences of their actions, just like I had faced mine. If you want to know what happened after the silence, you should probably hit subscribe. A month passed and I didn't hear from them. I didn't know if it was pride or something else keeping them away, but the absence felt peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living for myself. I took walks in the evenings, went fishing on weekends, something I hadn't done in years. I rediscovered things I had forgotten about, like the sound of my own laughter when I was alone, the way the sun felt on my skin without the weight of family obligations on my shoulders. And then one evening, the phone rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up and answered without thinking about the consequences. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It was Michael. His voice sounded different this time, calmer, maybe even a little more grounded. "Dad," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about what you said, about how you were always there and how I took that for granted. I've messed up and I know that now. I'm not asking for help, I'm just telling you that I understand, I get it, and I'm sorry." For a long moment I didn't speak. I had expected anger, more pleading, maybe even more guilt, but instead there was something I hadn't expected: sincerity. I could hear it in his voice, the change, the realization. "You've always been there, Michael," I said softly, "but I can't be that for you anymore. I can't fix everything. You have to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I wasn't sure what he was thinking, but I knew I had said what needed to be said. "I know," he finally whispered. "I'm going to try, I promise you I'll try." I took a deep breath, feeling the finality of it. That's all I can ask for. We didn't talk much after that. There were no grand apologies, no promises of what could be, but in that conversation there was something important, a sense of closure, a sense of peace. It wasn't the reconciliation I had once dreamed of, but it was real. It was enough. To find out how the story finally ends, you should probably hit subscribe. And just like that, I was done. The story wasn't perfect and it never would be, but it was mine. It was finally my story, not theirs. And for the first time in a long time, I could see a future that was mine alone. One where I didn't have to live in the shadow of their mistakes, their demands. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, that didn't scare me.